Welcome to the Rainmaker Podcast, where we elevate marketing leaders inside and out. I'm your host, Veronica Rami, master marketer, executive leader, and mentor to ambitious marketing leaders wanting to advance their careers. Each episode is filled with genuine, unscripted conversations with some of the world's top marketing experts, accomplished leaders, and industry trailblazers representing brands, both large and small. Our goal with this podcast and everything we do is to help you master your role, nurture your team, prioritize your well-being, and evolve into an industry-leading Rainmaker. This is the Rainmaker Podcast. I'm absolutely thrilled to introduce you to one of the most incredible marketing leaders I personally know and have followed for years and years, also the creator of a company called Creator Kitchen, a mastermind that fuels creators' innovation. Our guest today is the one and only Jay Acunzo, who is not just a marketing trailblazer, but also a genius behind the acclaimed Unthinkable podcast. With an impressive career spanning over a decade, Jay has honed his marketing expertise as renowned organizations such as ESPN, Google, and HubSpot. He brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to our conversation as we explore the in and outs of building confidence as a marketing leader. We discuss the pitfalls of comparison and the pressures to know it all, overcoming creator fatigue and finding intrinsic motivation, embracing vulnerability and being authentic, balancing ambition with your personal life, and the challenges of parenting. We get real about our personal failures and how they've shaped who we are today. So without further ado, let's make it rain with Jay Acunzo. Welcome to the podcast.
Veronica, long time coming. I'm really excited.
I know. This is really fun. For all of you that are listening, Jay and I kind of go way back, and it's just always so much fun when me and a guest get a chance to reconnect for all of you to listen to our conversation in the process. And I couldn't have picked a better guest to have, I think, a meatier conversation. Something that I find my beautiful marketers, my aspiring rainmakers that really struggle with, and this is universal regardless if you've been a marketer for 15, 20 years and you have a pedigree of pedigrees on your, resume, or you're just starting out, it doesn't really matter. I find that when I'm jumping on these kind of rainmaker calls and pathway calls, the number one villain, one of the most common villains on these phone calls in preventing my marketers from having the dream title, dream pay, dream life is lack of self-confidence. Now, at the same time, this is why, Jay, you're a perfect guest for this. They also desire to be a thought leader, an influential voice in the marketplace because they love their craft. They have a unique perspective. So they're riddled with self-confidence or the lack of self-confidence, but they still dream big. There's a bigger gap, right? And the gap it just gets wider and wider. And this is something that is also very personal to your story. So can we just dive right in? And how are you the expert on this topic? Why are you the perfect person to talk about this?
Oh, well, I don't know. I don't know about that. I would say that because what I talk about and think about all day is relating to storytelling, but there's a difference between learning story and being a storyteller.
Yes.
And I think that's everything. I think right in that little turn of phrase there is everything that I try to speak about, whether I'm talking about storytelling, like the mechanics of crafting a story, or the posture you have out in the world as a leader, as a creator, as a marketer. We're taught these externalized things, and a lot of those things are generalized. They don't take into account the specifics of you. I mean, my first book, Break the Wheel, was about questioning best practices and why we should hone our intuition to do our best work. My podcast, Unthinkable, it's about the decisions people make that take them away from a best practice in a way that at first seems unthinkable, but then inevitably when you hear their story, they're just trusting themselves more. And yes, their intuition more than some generalized expertise out there. So I don't know if I'm the perfect person. I do know that I've been on this train a while and trying to speed it up and arrive at interesting destinations. So yeah, I love that you're saying that. And, there's a really interesting heuristic that emerged when I was thinking about, some of my favorite storytellers or the way I like to tell stories as compared to how we learn story in some general sense. Because it does feel generalized. It's like, I get this question sometimes on podcasts. Jay, how should marketers think about story or incorporate story into it's in the same plane, that question, as how should we think about running Instagram ads? And it's a horizontal. It's everywhere you show. It's not something that you can put into a checklist, but we so badly want it to be that I've tried to really work hard to think about how do we see the code of the matrix here? What's really going on? And so I think about mastery as there are 3 P's to mastering a craft. And we over-index on one of them so much that we are not as confident as we need to be. And things that come along like AI threaten us either because we feel we're falling behind and we can't stand firm in who we are in the face of any trend, or we feel like this specific trend with AI we see ourselves too much in the work it can do in lazy fashion. Uh-oh.
Mm.
Right? And so the 3 P's of mastery: process, practice, and posture. And I
Ooh,
just want to define them.
please.
And I want to ask you, Veronica, like, of the 3, which do you think we are overemphasizing or focused on too much to the detriment of our own confidence? Ready? So process is the workflow, techniques, and tools
Uh-huh.
that we use to guide the work
Uh-huh.
process, right?
Uh-huh.
Practice is the regular commitment and execution to ship on a deadline
Uh-huh.
in a way that is focused on persistence, not financial gain. So that is the practice.
Yeah.
And then posture is the way you see yourself and the world and incorporate that vision into your work. So,
Okay.
like, having defined those now, this is a slam dunk. I'm just putting the softball on the tee and you're
Yeah.
going to hit a home run here. Like,
Yeah.
which of those sounds like where we obsess?
Well, what's interesting is that when I'm talking to these marketers that have these big dreams and hopes and aspirations, what they'll also relay to me is all the things they've already done. So I have this certification, I've taken this course, I went back and I'm considering my MBA, or like, just I think they're hiding away from the intangible by shoving as much of the tangibility or what they think is tangibilities or accreditations or accolades as they can,
Yeah.
hoping that that will overcompensate for the hardest part, which is to see yourself outside of yourself.
Yes, there it is. Like, you hit the nail on the head, which is the workflow, the techniques, and the tools, the
Yeah.
process is we are so either obsessed with it because we think it'll save us,
Yep.
or it's just a really convenient place to hide. Because look, I ran the
Yeah.
best practice, I ran the playbook and it didn't
Yeah.
work. I'm not on the hook for that. It's
Yeah.
not possibly something about me. It's the fact that,
Yeah.
well, podcasting doesn't work for me, or
Mm,
this content marketing playbook clearly is oversold by others. It's
mhm,
just a way to put the onus on something or someone else.
mhm.
And I get it. Like, it's scary to put yourself all the way on the hook, but that's kind of the business I'm in. Like, I started by admitting it. Like, I am in the business of helping people trust themselves so that they become more effective storytellers, so that they can resonate deeper with others and make things that matter. I mean, that is my mission, is to help people make things that matter. And that is the word resonate
Mhm.
that I think I've become known for. And so when I think about mastering a craft, taking this utilitarian and I think attainable approach to something, you stop thinking, how do I get more confident? And you start thinking, well, how do I master this craft? Well, process doesn't really require me. I can acquire it from somebody else. Maybe I should skip that for now and focus on practice. Because if I just throw myself at the work, I mean, I've been writing a story online once a week since 2005. Like, I have a process.
It's
Yeah,
wild.
I can distill it and teach it in parts, but it's suited to me, right? I built my own process because of a gratuitous, focused, consistent practice, right? So maybe leap to the practice part, start shipping on a deadline. And then as you do that, you develop this posture, the way you see yourself in the world, and legendary storytellers, just staying in marketing for a moment, do this all the time. What causes Anne Handley to go shopping at a grocery store in Maine and then see a magazine cover that makes her go, huh, let me think about that for a second. Oh, that reminds me of marketing. And then go tell you that story.
Yeah.
There's not extra resources. There's not some hidden process. And how do you spot these things? She can't explain that to you, right?
Yeah.
What she can say is, I just sort of noticed it and trusted myself to use that in my writing the next time I showed up. That's a posture thing. It's how you see yourself in the world. And that's a wonderful advantage if you can get there, much more than process, because it comes from you.
Mhm.
The punchline to this is, especially in this era of AI, the way I'd frame it or think about it is artificial intelligence and humans both rely on an LLM as their foundations.
Okay.
So with AI, that's a large language model. With a human being, that's your little life moments. And almost no human beings are willing in their work to draw upon those things. We're so caught up with this idea that there's something generalized and externalized that we need. But the best storytellers, the best communicators, the best leaders and inspiring voices in this world, the most influential voices, they are drawing gratuitously, confidently, consistently on their little lived moments to tell you a story, to come up with a metaphor, to get you to understand an insight in a new way or rethink something so that it sticks in your brain and they leave an impact. Right? That's where the good stuff happens. It's the stuff that requires you. That's your competitive edge. We got to use that more.
I find that marketers, at least the marketers I work with, and I'm sure that you see too, we are so good at discrediting ourselves than we are crediting
Yeah.
ourselves. And
Yeah.
and I don't know if it's the thief of comparison. So if I look at an Anne, I'm like, nowhere close to that. Whoa, right? If it's that, you look at the Gary V's, the Seth Godins, the whoever, pick anybody, it doesn't even matter. You're like, I'm so far from that. Or
Mm,
it's my credentials are not nearly as important as someone like you who's worked at HubSpot and ESPN and this, and like that. We're always discrediting ourselves for different things. But what I
yeah.
loved about the story you just relayed, it's like when Anne uses a story, it's not that she like slayed some dragon. It's like the most relatable human centric story of being in a grocery store or seeing ducks
Yeah.
across the street and then
Right.
extracting it. And then I think also layering her unique marketing perspective, her
Sure.
perspective, right?
Sure.
So when you're first working with somebody and their desire is to be a creator, what's the first villain to their narrative? What's usually the first like discredit that they give to themselves? You're like, whoa, we need to reframe this immediately.
Yeah, completely. They're trying too much to be an expert, which is this
Okay.
hardened, calcified understand. Like I know the answer. This
Okay.
is the tyranny of the right answer that school instills in us, right?
Yes.
Don't speak up. Don't ask questions. Don't muck around. Don't mess up.
Yeah.
You only speak up when you have the right answer. That favors people like me, white, straight, male. All like literally when I was born, the door was ajar, and my hard work is shouldering through the door. But there are
Mm,
people who, when they're born, there's a lock on that door. There's people who can't see the door. There's people who have a shark tank and barbed wire and laser beams in front of the
before.
door. Like
Yeah.
I spoke up when I didn't have the right answer. I mucked around, messed around, drafted things, shipped lots of bad work post school and professionally because I have this unearned privileged confidence, right? It
Mm-hmm.
was built into me from day one.
Mm-hmm.
And my parents, who are wonderful and supporting and loving, and my teachers and family and friends and all the opportunity around me just further cemented that, right? So the system I was in did not hurt me the way it hurts a lot of people, which is the only way you can show your value is if you right now have the right answer, which
Mm.
implies that you both have it and also that there is a singular right answer,
Yeah.
which like for most of the things we do, there isn't, you
Yeah.
know? And so the people out there who are preying on those beliefs or that damaged system are the ones going, I know the way. I have simple secrets.
Mm-hmm.
Trust me, and you will 10x your results in 10 days. They're the charlatans. That's why those people are so widely followed, I think, in
Mm-hmm.
the business world. But what I'm trying to do is maybe encourage people to question that, at least to start to decouple that like need to trust those people or need to present as the expert, and the antithesis, or at least a way to bring your expertise out in a new way,
Mm-hmm.
is to be an explorer,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like ask bolder questions, pursue curiosity, start with frustration. You're on the journey to find out. That's who people want to hire too, not like, well, hey, Veronica, in this interview process, I wanted to ask you, what, if you came on board here, what would you do here? You just throw out a bunch of
Yeah.
theories or stories from your past that resemble that, but then be willing to admit to that employer, I actually don't have all the answers, but I know how to find it out. I know how to figure this out. Way more valuable. Or the posture of a storyteller is, hey, the status quo is broken and I see a mountain peak in the distance. Let's go there. That's my vision for what would be better. Here's an example. I believe creativity we put up on a pedestal. I believe it's actually the little tiny choices that make somebody what we deem as creative. So the way I would phrase that is, in the status quo, the current culture, we think of creativity as doing something big. You know what happened? Like if we had a magical technology that could scan Ann Handley, Seth Godin, Gary Vaynerchuk, Malcolm Gladwell, whomever, for me, it'd be Anthony Bourdain, my favorite storyteller. If we could scan their whole body of work with some kind of magical scanner, you know what we uncover? We'd uncover that most of the things they made were crap. So we put them on a pedestal, but the pedestal is made of crap. Their
Mm-hmm.
body of work, their drafting and even shipped projects is largely not that good, but they were willing to just go through these tiny motions, go through these things, and eventually some of the things hit. And so all we see is the final, or all we see is the wins. So we
Mm-hmm.
think creativity means doing something big. So that's the problem with the status quo. All right, away in the distance, my mountain peak that I want to get people to, it's actually more about the minutia, the micro, the tiny little choices, any one of which any of us could make. So join me on this journey while I try and redefine creativity like that. I don't have the answers. I have a lot of questions. I have some expertise, right? I'm going to talk to Veronica and ask you not to tell your backstory, but I'm going to model my show much more like Song Exploder. Like, bring a project, Veronica, we'll dissect it in the minutia, and it's there we'll find your genius. I don't want to hear about the big wins in your life. I want to hear about one project and the slog you went through to create. Why? Well, because my premise here, my mountain peak, is this is what creativity is, the sum total of little choices,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's the posture of an explorer, not an expert. It's like, I don't have the answers, but I'm asking questions and I'd like to change something
Yeah.
Join me for this journey.
Yeah.
And so it helps us beat back this tyranny of the right answer.
I'm having a lot of feelings. So let me explain. So this year, on a personal note, I've been working a lot with, there's different modalities of therapy. My favorite one right now, it's called IFS, internal family systems, so that we as human beings are made of lots of parts, which is the movie Inside Out for all your parents out there, right? We have lots of parts. And I do find that a lot of us have this intellectual part. It's funny because this intellectual part is the one that gets a lot of the achievement. And so it's always served us well. It's always been for our good. And so we really let it protect us. And it's kind of this intellectual armor that will show up in the pursuit of trying to get more achievement. The irony that I have found in pursuing my own personal branding endeavors or making something out of nothing is the intellectual armor has not served me nearly as much as the vulnerability behind it.
Yes.
But it's also terrifying. Like on a psychological level, I'm like, oh my gosh. Like if I really put my most authentic self out, my most authentic voice, and I really shared what I thought or I believed or how I viewed the world, and somebody disagreed with it, that is more dangerous than having somebody disagree with my pedigree, my diploma, my whatever.
Yeah.
And so like when you're working with these aspiring creators, how do you break through that armor? How do you convey the importance of vulnerability, authenticity, in that being the means in which you have what you're actually seeking, not just another thing on the plaque?
Right. The entirety of the process that
Okay.
unfolds is
Yeah.
you aerating ideas. You're never finished. Like it's on the website as this is my premise for my whole business or my premise for my podcast. By the way, a premise, that's the assertion you're making, right? The premise of a joke. Ever notice how toddlers always interrupt you when you're trying to have a serious conversation? That's a premise, right?
Yeah.
So the premise of my work, don't be the best, be their favorite. That's
Oh,
the premise for my whole platform. And other tangential sound bites and words emerge from that. How did I get there? By the way, it's not where I'll stay, but how did I get there for now?
I love that.
Is I built a lot of stuff. I aerated things. I gave myself a feedback loop of publishing during the practice, every other week on a newsletter, every other week on a podcast, social media, conversations. Everything is sort of giving me a feedback loop, like myself to myself. You know, like, how do you know if that shirt on the rack fits? I don't know. Try it on. Take it off. Try a different brand, try a different size, try a different color. So I'm always trying things on for size. And it's never been easier to do that because look at all these free places we can publish. What a gift. So the feedback loop is myself to myself. How does it feel to me? But also my audience. Can I get a small number of people reacting in big ways? Right? Because that's not my final success. That's just signal I'm on the right path. Right? So, okay, consider that that's the practice. It's this constant journey to aerate your ideas, tighten them, and improve them.
Okay.
Or like my friend Andrew Davis likes to say, ask questions Google can't answer.
Yeah.
Right? That's genius. So, all right, well, that's where you want to get, but you're holding back because what if? What if they dislike? What if they don't respond? So the first thing is confidence is not like I'm going to flip a switch or I'm going to read some nice sounding Instagram post or phrase on a mug and now I'm confident.
Yeah.
Don't try to be confident. Try to be practiced. Right? Like the reason I'm going to approach a documentary series with a client with unearned confidence okay, I've only done 1 3-episode docuseries, but I'm totally confident we can pull this off, is because I've written an ungodly amount of things on the internet.
Yeah.
I've made thousands of podcast episodes and probably 15 or 20 client shows at this point. Like I am practiced. So even tangential things, I can be a little more confident, right? But I also know how to figure out the right questions to ask to learn and update my thinking and proceed with confidence, right? So I think that's the first thing is, I run a membership called the Creator Kitchen, and the transformation in the kitchen is to move you from smart expert to influential voice. And what we're not talking about is how to tweet a bunch of post a bunch of like fortune cookie things that make you a visionary and a thought leader. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about like, well, what's the gap here? The gap is you need a practice. And through that practice, you explore a premise. And through that premise, you start to push all of your decisions, all of your choices to produce content that is at once higher value and more original, right? Like there's a method to the madness. And it begins with having a place you show up consistently to ship, to explore, to re-engineer things for the next time. I like to joke that this starts not with like a switch psychologically or emotionally. It literally starts with making the satisfying moment in your day. I have pressed the button that said publish. If you can tell me you're doing that on a consistent basis, now let's talk about the other stuff. But if you're not, and most people are not, then that's where you start. You don't have a brilliance problem. You don't have a confidence problem. You have a practice problem. You have a momentum problem. So we have to start there.
Okay, I have a couple things going through my mind. Number one, I think this is a beautiful parallel to leadership 101 too. Like,
Mm,
I think a lot of us feel like to be a true leader, we have to have all the answers. And I have found over the course of my career, it's not that I always had to have the best answers or the right answers or any
yeah.
answer at all. It was more like I got really good at asking other people questions
Mm,
and facilitating conversation that drew out an answer from the body of people that was around me. So that has been something that we try very desperately to teach our rainmakers. Like, you don't have to have all the answers, but what we're
yeah.
going to teach you is how to extract great answers from your
Yes.
team. Hey Rainmakers, it's Veronica, and we'll get back to today's episode. But before that, I have an exciting invitation for all of you aspiring, ambitious marketing leaders. If you are serious about advancing your career in marketing and you're looking for an expert to give you some personal insights, guidance, tips, then I'm going to invite you to schedule a free Pathway to Promotion call with me. This is a special one-on-one call with just you and me to discuss your current roadblocks in your career, your long-term aspirations and ambition, and the next best step for you and your personal promotion. Head to pathwaycall.com or click the link in my show notes to schedule your free Pathway to Promotion call. Now back to today's episode. Now, I'm listening to you. I'm loving everything that you're saying per usual. However, one of the other things that come up a lot in the content creator journey is what we call the content creator fatigue,
Mhm.
right? Because I work with a lot of brands that are prolific in their production. I mean, we create a whole department, a whole division of the organization just to support the amount of content coming out. It's insane. But then when you talk to these CEOs or you talk to these aspiring visionaries, like, the fatigue is also real.
Totally.
And so how, because you have, I mean, you got the receipts, man. Like, how have you been able to do this for this long
Yeah.
without quote unquote burning out?
So there's two ways to look at this. There's me personally, and then there's the people I speak to publicly and how I try to help them. The way I've tried to combat this to avoid burning myself out has failed.
Okay.
I am routinely burned out. I have two tiny kids. I have two very little kids. I am routinely sick. I wake up every morning and the first question on my mind is, did anyone get the license plate of the truck that hit me? I have, my ambition over the years has chewed me up and spat me out
Yeah.
again and again and again. And it's damn near swallowed me whole several times.
Yeah.
So far be it from me to tell you how not to burn out.
Okay.
What I can do is a lot more focused and tactical, because I do it from, this is something I do for myself, is I know how to get off the content hamster wheel. I
Okay.
know how not to let content creation burn you out. And I think the most important piece of this all is eventually it comes back around to the same place. We'll talk about the frameworks, we'll talk about the examples, but eventually it's got to get to intrinsic motivation. It has to be the reason I'm succeeding, the reason I'm creating is I can't not. Like, I don't know any other way. I used to wake up before kids and like happily walk at 7 a.m. to a coffee shop, be the first one there and just write, because I just like the feel of my fingers on the keys. And I like the romanticism behind, like, I can write things. No one can tell me not. I came from print journalism where there's editors and layers of editors at that. And you have to pay your dues on the beat before you become the columnist. You're telling me that for free, I can make pretty much anything?
Yep.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
So when you stop treating it like a means to an end and
Mm.
the creating is the end game for you, which it is for me, I just want to keep going. So I, like, again, I don't know how to rewire someone's brain to treat work like that, or at least content creation work. And so this is what makes me sad is people think of content as a utility to get some
Mhm.
kind of outcome, right?
Yes.
There you are going to approach fatigue and burnout quicker.
Yeah.
I can help you beat it back, but inevitably it's going to take hold because it's not the place naturally giving you energy, right? It'd be like asking an introvert to present as an extrovert all day, every day, which many corporations do. What happens? You need the moment to recharge, right? So my way of recharging happened this morning. I'm writing my newsletter, right? Or next week, I'm editing the next podcast episode. That's where I get my kicks.
Mhm.
So let's start there with complete and total honesty here. The absolute best case scenario is we find something that feels like it's intrinsically motivating to you, Because when you have moments of burnout, and you will, when the kids get up too early, and they do, when the world feels like it's burning around you, and it does, you can find that place that energizes you and draft off of that, like literally draft and also emotionally draft. So I just wanted to start there.
Well, and I hope you don't mind. I want to ask you on a personal note because you brought up the
Yeah.
kids. So I too have two man cubs. We're not in the little fade. They're
Okay.
7 and almost 10 now. So we're on
Okay.
like
We're four and two
we're
over
in
here.
the obnoxious in between where like farts are hilarious, and I'm like gross.
Well,
So
okay, listen, in fairness to them,
gross.
farts are hilarious.
No, stop it. No, it's gross. I look at my
You're going to see the
husband.
drop off rate of this
Oh my
episode. Just
gosh.
comment right there.
I tell when these things happen, I look at my husband, I'm like, oh gosh, I had to buy a furry little girl because I didn't get one. But anyways, something that I have, and this affects different people, different genders
Yeah.
differently. So like, I also want to acknowledge that, but like,
Sure.
I'm a highly ambitious person. I've
Mhm.
always, from birth, have always had a drive that pushes me towards a destination, whether
Right.
it's getting to the airport or achieving something or getting my diploma. Like, I like this about me. I actually really do enjoy this about me. I like having drive. I like being a hard worker, and I like working towards a goal.
Yeah.
And so I have a strong, healthy, a strong dose of ambition. I also am a mother and a wife and highly involved in my community and church and things like that. And so there are often times where these two loves of life, whether it's, family, but also, having a contribution and serving others in the world,
Yep.
it can feel like there's not enough capacity or space to hold both.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm curious because, again, you've been so freaking prolific with your professional work, but you're
Sure.
also a family person. How have you done? How have you personally, Jay, like found space for both of these loves?
It's always a give and take. There's always these phrases you go to as a parent to try and project that you figured it out. I don't know that I've figured out the overlap of ambition and
Mhm.
parenting. And every time I show up publicly and admit that, I get profound gratitude, which I didn't expect. Like, I've been talking a lot more about that, even though it's not my core platform,
Sure.
because I do feel like a lot of folks feel like it's unique to them, or a lot of folks feel like bad for feeling the way they feel.
Yeah. Shame, guilt. Yeah.
I talk about parenting. I use an analogy called dream logic.
Okay.
So in a dream, you're like, I'm underwater and I have no helmet, but I can breathe. And also, this is a highway and I'm driving a car. Also, the car is a pickle. And also, welcome to the bakery that my dad runs. Like, what? It's like it's like you're tripping acid. What?
Yeah.
But your brain in a dream just goes, yeah, that all adds up. Yep, that tracks, right? Because it's not real world logic. It's dream logic, right?
Yeah.
So having kids for me has been the most wonderful thing in the world. Having kids for me has been the most horrible thing in the world. Having kids for me has been what is it? It's everything.
It's
What does the
all.
culture tell you it is?
Yeah.
One or the other. And
Yeah.
usually it's a gift. It's amazing. It's blah, blah, blah. So there's a cultural story that just beats you into this guilty little shrunken corner where you just like, oh, I must be the problem. Or I have to stand up and like be plucky about it and figure it out. And because others have. And
Mhm.
here's this again, back to the Instagram quote and the phrase on the mugs. There's all of this stuff you're given or has been forced upon you, something very subtly. It's a very insidious culture, the kind of work and parenting overlap that sort of seeps in and makes you feel certain ways that you didn't expect. But the only way I can possibly explain it is to not try to explain it in any pithy way at all, because it is dream logic. It doesn't make friggin' sense to deal with this. It doesn't. And if you can at least start there,
Mhm.
you stop feeling so bad so you can see things day to day a little bit more clearly. Like, one of the things I've realized is when I started having kids, we have two, I've always been a sprinter. Everywhere I've gone, I'm like you, like from birth, ambitious. I'm going to go
Yeah.
at it. I'm going to get the good grades, go to the good school, join the clubs, be president of the club. I'm going to be like, top performer on the team. I'm going to manage
Yeah.
the team. Oh, don't want to manage. I'm going to be an independent voice, like all these things, hard charging all the time. And when you have kids, like even when you encounter like an obstacle, when that's you're like, no problem. I know how to like leap over the obstacle or run fast around it or plow through it. Like, I'm going to make sure that I'm on this like same trajectory because I'm a sprinter.
Yeah.
But then what happens is when you have kids, it's now like you're trying to sprint, but the ground isn't firm anymore. You're in mud.
Yeah.
And actually, antithetical to your existence, sprinting harder in mud only makes you sink deeper.
Yep.
It only burns you out faster. It only causes more problems at home and at work and all these things. So the only place I've gotten to 4.5 years, almost 5 years into being a dad at this point, is I've had to embrace in myself that although I am a sprinter, I am currently in mud. And the only thing you can do in mud is not learn how to sprint despite the mud. It's to learn to trudge through the mud gracefully.
Mm-hmm.
That is it. Right. And so here's a way that's manifest in my world. I gave myself permission to stop 2005 to 2019, maybe. My daughter was born in 18. I was publishing a weekly article.
Mm-hmm.
2015 to 2019, I was publishing a weekly podcast episode. I switched to every other week. Guess what happened? Lots of good things. I can explore things more deeply. People unsubscribe less often. People have appreciated and shared that work more often or responded to me more. I've gotten better at the thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
The reason I made that choice had nothing to do with work. It had
Mm-hmm.
everything to do with how I felt because of my home.
Mm-hmm.
That's me trying to trudge more gracefully. Or I'm trying to pursue a premise. I have one train of thought at all times, which is I want to help you learn to resonate. How? Well, the how I'm on right now is to be an effective storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
How? I can talk your ear off about that. That's it. That's what I get. I don't also get all these other projects. I used to tinker on logos, like bad logos in PowerPoint, dreaming of launching this new project or whatever. I had the marketing event line, call in and complain anonymously about your marketing situation, like, multiple podcasts, a bunch of different speeches. I've just had to prune down to the thing that feels like, well, this is where I can have the greatest impact. That's trudging more gracefully.
Do you know, I resonate with that because I parenting is the best of times, the worst of times. It's very paradoxical. It
It's
really
dream
is.
logic. That's all.
It's so true. But there's nothing, and at least for me, I'll speak for me, there's nothing that has made me prioritize or discern what needs to stay and what needs to go more than having the kids.
Yeah.
Because I can't just crank out a 15+ hour day. I just don't, I
Right.
don't have that.
Yeah.
They wake up when they wake up, they come home from school when they come home from school. And it's like, it's their time too. So, but I do think the permission, it's funny what you said about like allowing your creative work to have more breathing space, like having a fine wine breathe from the bottle.
Yeah.
Like it actually just makes it more enjoyable. And so like actually that really resonates with me sometimes in the hamster wheel of content creation where more advise that more is better than less. I love that you're like Renaissance in the sense like, no, I'd rather pump out better quality content than just for the sake of more content.
Quality that's a trigger word for a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
How do you define quality,
Yeah.
Veronica? How do you define, like, it becomes a debate instead of making
Sure.
progress?
Yeah.
So one way I've tried to combat that is to think about, well, let's just accept for a moment that even if with the same volume, you also want greater power. So I'm not
Mhm.
asking you publish less. I'm just saying, what if everything you published had greater power? In other words, what if more of your work worked? Let's just start there. We
Okay.
can worry about the volume later. What if more of your work worked? What if it was higher impact? Everybody would want that. What does that mean? What does that look like? I think that the impact of your work, and this is how you get off the hamster wheel, is directly proportional to two traits.
Okay.
It's value to others and it's originality to you. So in other words, like, let's look at those as two spectra, right? You can kind of put it up like a little graph. So on the vertical axis, you have value. And at the bottom is informational. It's merely informational. What is AI? Or, I mentioned Bourdain, the backstory of
Mhm.
Anthony Bourdain. Informational. Very low value. It's like handing someone a map. You're like, this is North America. Very low value. And then we start to get like, okay, we got to be higher value. Let's instruct. It's not informational, it's instruction. So it's how to adopt AI, or it's 6 tips to tell better stories, a la Bourdain, or it's like the map analogy continues. Let me draw a red line on the map from here to there. And then the problem becomes, well, your audience then receives this instruction on the map, but they encounter an obstacle, like a tree on the path that they didn't expect, and neither did you, because they have a unique scenario. What are they going to do? They have no recourse, right? Because you're not as valuable as you could be. So more than informational, more than instructional, highest value is insightful. That's not like, what is AI? That's, why does AI matter to small businesses in B2B in Calgary, Canada? Or why Bourdain told stories that affected you so much, right? It's not just what works, it's why it works. That's so much more valuable. It's like handing people a compass and they can get their true north, get their bearings. Now they're a navigator instead of a direction follower. So that's like one dimension, is can you pull out very useful and very valuable insights from your content and stop publishing informational stuff? And then the other spectrum would be originality. And on one extreme, you have generalized expertise, could come from anybody, a prescription for better podcasts. And then on the other side, you have your personal perspective, which is, well, I'm going to dissect 5 of my favorite shows, arriving at my prescription for making a better podcast, right? Or I'm not going to tell you, hey, just try new things, right? Just do it. Stop researching so much, Veronica. Stop following the experts, taking the courses. Just do it. That's a generalized way of giving you advice. I could tell you a story, though, about what changed in my life that caused me to stop being afraid of making espresso in my kitchen, which was something I dealt with for many years, believe it or not. And then I could say, you know what I realized? Now that I make it all the time, I spent way too much time trying to research the perfect way, trying to ask my wife to do it. Like, that was embarrassing. I'm Italian, for Pete's sake. Like, I should be Pietro's sake, for Pietro's sake. I'm Italian. Like, what changed? I made it one time and I discovered, oh, it's actually not as scary. I shouldn't have over researched this or
Sure.
delayed it. And then I say something that every storyteller arrives at when they start getting off the hamster wheel. You say, well, that's the thing about trying new things. We're not afraid of the task itself. We're afraid of the unknown. And if that's the case, we should move faster to make the unknown known. Try the thing once. So that little phrase, that's the thing about, forces you to go up the value spectrum and across the originality spectrum. That's the thing about this topic that you want from me, this insight that I have for you. Like, a storyteller arrives at that moment where they translate their world into yours, and suddenly they have an insight for you, more valuable. And it's coming from their personal perspective.
Yeah.
So it's way more original. And all of a sudden, everything you do, without adding more resources, because you can just do that in a paragraph when you open the next blog post, it just suddenly lands or resonates with greater power. So now that you can communicate with greater power, go ahead and decrease the volume if you want. Get off the hamster wheel. Go ahead and pursue something differently, right? It's not about the resources of it. It's about, can you use the words and the resources that you're already deploying publicly with greater impact?
Okay, so I'm going to bring this back to teams because, again, I just think there's so many parallels to leadership and great teams. Some of my
Yeah.
favorite teams, the most effective or successful teams, have been teams that have adopted this ethos or mentality of like fail fast. So you remove the fear of your team feeling like they can't even creatively try something different for the fear
Yeah.
of failure and
Right.
retribution.
Right.
No, actually, we embrace failure, but how we do a distinct take on it is we want to just fail faster. So we want to, like you said, know the things, make the unknown known,
Yeah.
because that's the game that we get to play. And that's where you
Yeah.
get to celebrate the sprinters, but also celebrate a vibe, a culture of creativity and exploration at the same
Yes.
time. And so
Yes.
I love, that was like the perfect little truffle to put that together. But
That's genius.
so here's and again, we could talk forever and ever and ever. I would love for you. So this is what I do with my guests. I let to have you have the last question. I'm a little nervous.
Yeah.
So you get to be the host for our last question of today's podcast.
Sure. What is it that we are not seeing about your body of work that is the reason you are confident or deemed creative or deemed successful? What is that? Give me the chance to use this fake imaginary technology where I'm going to scan Veronica's body of work. And what I'm going to uncover is, if I'm upholding you on a pedestal as amazing, which you are, what you see is, that pedestal is just made of a bunch of crap. Give me some of that crap.
Just curious. So oh man, this is like
I'd be happy to reciprocate if you need the permission. About, like I mentioned, the marketing vent line, 0 people called that, right? I've written blog posts for years. My average view count, if I had to put a number on it, I would guess 7, maybe 7.5, because someone arrived by accident. Like, I have done so much work that no one has paid attention to or is actually terrible. So there you go. Permission to reciprocate.
So what is it that people, okay, let me just, because it's a good question. I think it's a fair question. And again, it requires that one ingredient that we talked about earlier, which is like a level of vulnerability that is scary, right?
But why? Like, you are worth paying attention to, not because everything you've done is great, but
Mhm.
because you've had the courage to persist, even though a lot of what you've done is not.
Mhm.
That's what makes someone worth doing it. It's that I've figured some stuff out through the work, not like, this hit me one day. I was born with it. I don't know. Daddy gave me a bunch of money. I don't know. Like, that's not what makes someone worth following. It's the fact that you've gone on the journey, but also know how to teach it to someone else.
I think what people probably don't realize about my body of work, or it's like Pocahontas, right? Like when I got in the river of personal branding, I actually
Mm,
had no idea where it was going to take me. And if I
mhm.
look back at my career, I feel like I've had like 9 lives, like a kitty cat, right? Like it's just, I would never. And then people ask me all the time, like, how did you work for Tony? And how did you get into? I'm like, I didn't seek it out. It's not like I had on like my vision board a cutout of Tony Robbins. Like, I'm going to work for that guy one day. Which a lot of people have that story, and then they manifest it and they make it happen. I did not. Like, as a daughter of Cuban immigrant parents, I just wanted to be successful to show my parents that their sacrifice was worth it. So I didn't necessarily have this distinct vision of my existence, of my present state and career as the 5-year version of Veronica. Actually, I had no idea I was going to get to this place. I thought entrepreneurship, like the calling of the wild, would come because I have this theory that entrepreneurs birth other entrepreneurs. So like I knew that my parents had that, and then maybe it was in my DNA somewhere. But I don't think, and I've never said this, so here we go. I don't think people realize how much what I'm doing today is what they've called in therapy as a corrective emotional experience,
Hmm.
which means like I was the marketer that was told I was too much. I was the marketer that got passed up. I was the marketer that was praised one day and fired the next. I've had some really, really shitty moments in my career, really glorious moments, but also like really embarrassing moments that like, make me feel horrible.
Yeah.
And so here I am helping other marketers go through their hard moments to get to their mountaintops. And I don't think people realize how much in doing that for others, it's actually selfishly giving me corrective emotional experiences of my own previous hardships that never necessarily had a resolution with the people that offended me.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. Beautiful. I love that.
We'll have to edit this later. No, I'm just kidding. No, but it's true. And I mean, look, I think a lot of us form businesses to either solve problems that we see in the world, or a lot of us are solving or healing a version of ourselves from before.
Sure.
And
Sure.
so I don't really, that's not on my sales page. That's not like
Yeah.
necessarily in my bio ever. But if I'm being radically honest, I lead a lot in the work that I do with a lot of empathy because I
Yep.
know what it is.
Yes. I can't personally, I have a friend who runs a SaaS company, a software as a service company, and he could work in real estate. He could work in
Sure.
workflow software. Because he likes the mechanics of building SaaS. So for him, the intrinsic motivation comes from the mechanics of building the work, the
Got it.
operational
Builder.
stuff.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that topic, the problem, the audience he speaks to, that's where I need to draw my motivation, right? Like I need to speak to a maker of some kind, someone who's a communicator, someone who wants to leave a legacy. I need to tap the psychographics of
Yes.
that audience and
Yes.
not just speak to the marketing as a job title, but to the desires, the fears, the hopes, the beliefs.
Yeah.
Like that to me, there's that self-awareness that I've earned over the years where I've tried to do the other things. I've tried to work for companies where like, yeah, I kind of sort of maybe care about the topics, maybe care about the audience. You told me I could write, so I show up for work and I leave feeling hollow. Right. And so I think like that's hard won. And I'm, in my late 30s, I have no doubt if you talk to me in a decade that I would listen to this interview and point out tons of things that have changed or that I've learned, because I think the well goes ever deeper. So thank you for sharing that from that vulnerable place, because it's helping me realize something about me.
Well, speaking of you, where can people connect with you? How can they learn more about the Creator Kitchen, which I'm like so obsessed with right now?
Thank
I
you.
like literally stalked it just for like a good hour. So
Thank you.
tell people where they can connect with you further.
Yeah, my site is jayacunzo.com, and that's my books, my speaking, my documentary series, my podcast. The sort of pride and joy of my digital body of work is probably Unthinkable, which is an atypical sounding, and I hope people think it's a refreshing sound business podcast and focused on helping people do all the things we talked about today. And that's a really great dovetail right into the membership that I run, the Creator Kitchen.
Awesome. Okay, Jay, thank you so much for being on today's Rainmaker podcast.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us on today's Rainmaker podcast. Marketers help other marketers. So if there's a marketer in your life who could really use a new perspective in a way that helps them advance their career, please pass this episode forward, share, leave us a review. Everything helps as we embark on helping as many marketers elevate themselves inside and out. You can always visit veronicarami.com for today's show notes, additional links to some free resources and tools for you to help you advance your career. You can always connect with us on social media at @VRomney if you want more behind the scenes or a way for us to connect personally. Until next time, my friends, make it rain.